Our team at Atlantic Construction Podcast is excited to announce our newest partner, Luminous Labs. Luminous Labs is the leading provider of architectural visualizations for developers, homeowners, architects, and more. Luminous Labs has a team of experienced designers and visualizers using cutting-edge technology to bring your 3D renderings to life. Using these architectural visualizations will give you a sense of scale, space, and design, allowing you to make informed decisions about your projects before construction even begins. These high-end architectural visualizations are a perfect tool for presentations, marketing materials, and design reviews, allowing you to communicate your vision to stakeholders, clients, and more. We'd like to thank our co-branded partner, Procore Technology. Procore Technologies is the global leader in construction management software. We look forward to having many guests from across the country from all different capacities under the Procore partnership umbrella. We'd like to thank our formal partner, Payzant Building Products. Payzant has a 60,000 square foot facilitation center currently underway, as well as acquired a new location in Windsor. Lots of change and big news with Payzant, and we look forward to having them back on the podcast in the near future. Okay, welcome back to the Atlantic Construction Podcast. Very excited today to have our guest. We have Catherine Hefler, Architect Education Practice Lead from Architecture 49, and we have Sean Andrew, Senior Project Manager with PCL Construction, and we'll be discussing the Bedford Ravines school project, the largest school in the province to date, which is opening, I believe, in a few weeks. Is that correct, Catherine?
That's right. Yeah. Bringing students in September.
Yeah. So very exciting time. Usually what we do to start is kind of just give some context, some background on our guests. So before we do dive into that specific project and obviously PCL and A49, their respective roles in completing a design build large school project here in the province. Well, maybe we can start with you, Sean. We were talking earlier, and I know this is a long time ago, but you did do some work with PCL on the, at the time it was the Air Canada Centre, now the Scotiabank Arena, but
right.
One of many obviously complex projects you've been a part of. But could you tell us a little bit about that experience and then kind of go from there?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, it actually started even before that. I started with PCL in Ottawa. We did the Senators Arena.
Yeah.
So that was back in '94.
Out in Farmers Field.
That's right. It was they didn't have a lot of money at the time, so they built this project way out west of Canada, out in a farmer's field, to the point where we actually used the farmer's house as our office. So did that project for 2 years.
You go up there somewhat in the Ottawa region, right?
Yeah. I kind of moved there just at the beginning of high school. Did high school, university, kind of those young years.
Were you in the military?
No.
Okay.
No. Just my father was in the military, so we moved around a lot.
Right. I knew you mentioned earlier something about the military, right?
Yeah.
So it was your father, and you had to move with him, right? That's how it goes.
Yeah. So we ended up in Ottawa and stayed there for a number of years, and then Dad got out of the forces, and we stuck around. But then even after that, when I started working with PCL, I moved around quite a bit. So my first 10 years in PCL, I went from Ottawa to Toronto to Ottawa to Halifax to Ottawa back to Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
So we've bumped around a lot.
Yeah.
So I started in Ottawa on at the time it was the Corral Center, and we did that stadium.
Name. Yeah.
And then
those are the Daniel Alfredson days.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did that for 2 years, and then we won the contract to do the Air Canada Centre in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So they kind of grabbed most of us, picked us up, and moved us to Toronto, and to do that project.
But those are some neat experiences. Obviously, seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, like you're working on a lot of complex design build projects as a PM. And that's kind of your forte. And those early experiences on projects, these arena type projects in Central Canada that obviously are well known, those must have been kind of crucial to your growth, I guess, in your career.
Yeah, I'd say so. It was an exciting time, right? Like you're building something that is a monument.
A staple in the community, a national monument, even with the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Raptors.
Exactly, right? And it started off as the Raptors Arena, and that was really exciting building that. And then the Leafs bought the Raptors, and so then we're building the new Maple Leaf Gardens essentially, which was pretty exciting. So there we had players coming out for site visits, and I remember Ty Domi coming out and finding a guy who was wearing a Montreal Canadian shirt and, jokingly ripping it off him, and
But not jokingly.
no, exactly.
Yeah.
And Ty Domi wants to rip your shirt off.
Yeah.
You'd let him, right? So it was really fascinating, and I was fortunate enough to work with, I think, some of the best people in the company. So probably one of my biggest mentors, Oscar Godet, who was the superintendent on both those projects, really molded me in a lot of ways, and I really appreciated that opportunity to work with him. So there was that great experience, and then onwards from him, actually one of the guys who started the office here, John Volko, was on that project, and he and I got to work together on that, and Ian Stewart, and just the names of almost legendary PCL people.
Right.
I got the experience to work with, so that really was exciting.
Is there anything, just to draw out from that, like, is there anything some of these guys who you would consider mentors, or like you said, like just legends in the PCL company as project managers and managing these major complex projects, like, is there anything you can draw out? What was it about the way they approached some of these projects as far as like logistics and planning, and just having that 30,000-foot view of catching things a year in advance, or anything like specific like that you would have taken from some of those guys?
I think Oscar was probably the most influential in that sense. He was a superintendent, so I'm project manager, so he was field, and so I had that opportunity for the first 5 or 6 years of my career to be a field person, and so that makes a whole world difference, because
The intuition.
Understanding how construction works, physically being part of it, seeing how it works, what's involved, brought forward into the management side of things. Being able to properly, scope a project, understand how it's going to be built, understand what the triggers are, understand the schedule. That was huge. And Oscar was probably one of the most detailed planning people you could imagine. He was just, meticulous. And back then everything was, on paper.
Yeah.
And I can still remember we'd have little sticky notes that we'd put dates, and we'd be planning and kind of organizing. And, when you get these really complex projects, whether it's, near a Canada Center, a school, or an airport, that ability to think it through in this piece, and then this piece, and then that piece, I think really, came from Oscar. He really drove that into me, and he was just so exacting and very much a perfectionist on it. So that was huge for my career. I think it gave me that flexibility to understand how these projects need to work and what's involved.
Right. Yeah, because as someone who's in your position, it's so autonomous, right? There's so many to have understanding of this point and that point, and like you say, the physical site on through to organizing and all the preliminary, and like just to have worked with someone who's like that, right? I mean, to be a site super on a project like the Air Canada Center, I mean, that's like you're an Army commander plus a business person plus it's a very intense job that 1% of the population within the industry can handle a job like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Oscar did both, right? Corral Center or Canada Center.
Wow.
I got to be his what I jokingly say, his whipping boy, right? So it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Maybe we can jump over to you, Catherine. Obviously, you're a former Dalhousie student. Master of Architecture from Dalhousie, graduated with that in 2012, and just a psychology degree. Interesting journey that way, and worked on a lot of schools in the province and outside the province. Currently, the Stratford High School is starting, and I can mention a few: Bridgetown, Sacred Heart, all kinds.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe just kind of start us off with your time at Dalhousie and
sure.
how that's. Yeah.
So I started off like you said, my first degree is in psychology, and I worked for a little while with some teams at the EduC, and so I really knew I wanted to do something in my life that was making, trying to help, trying to make some kind of impact on people, children.
Right. But did you know at the time that you would pursue architecture then?
No. I mean, I grew up building things, painting, really creative. It was more like a hobby.
Yeah.
And then I just did like this 180 in university and decided to kind of throw my hat into the architecture ring and see what happened.
So that would be
at
unique
Dal.
to have a psychology.
You know
minor.
what?
Not
Dal is actually
necessarily.
great in a way because you do need some prior undergraduate experience in order to be accepted into the architecture program. But they want quite a broad range. So certainly there's people who come in with, you know, an urban design background or a planning background, some engineering as well. But there's also the fine arts, the education, the people with an English degree. And it's really amazing, the program in that way that you learn from your peers and you get this really broad approach to design and people. So yeah, I something about through my studies, just the ability to make like a tangible impact on people's mental and physical health. So
Absolutely.
Has been fantastic for my career. So, you know, the DAL program is great in that it has the work terms. So I was able to do my short work term in Toronto with a small firm called GBSA. And I worked on a library and a small school there. So you're starting to see, you know, even at a really early stage, working with clients, working with the public, seeing these kind of end user groups in, you know, a library is very much an educational environment.
Yeah.
And then I did my second work term out in Vancouver and worked with a firm called Dialogue, which is quite large in Canada as well. And was able to work on a large school project during that work term. And just really loved the process. Loved the end user groups and thinking about how the spaces we were making were really kind of impacting these students and teachers and how their day was going to play out. So a real love of that, I think, even from an early start in my education.
The focus on the
I think so.
design for educational buildings.
How that could be, and just public buildings in general, I guess, was always my interest. And so then close to 10 years ago, I, you know, came to Architecture 49 and had the opportunity to work really closely with some of the principals there. So Stacey Hughes and Craig Mosier, they have such a long, just really excellent history of focusing on educational design in Nova Scotia, but also kind of in the Atlantic provinces. So the ability to kind of work with them for the last close to 10 years and focus on these types of projects through you know, the provinces that I consider home and really
yes, you grew up in Nova Scotia, right?
I did, yes. So yeah, it's been a fantastic opportunity to kind of learn from the best, really. And they brought me into it in a way of we're just going to bring you to every meeting. We're going to teach you everything we know.
Throw you in the deep end.
Exactly. And any bit of, you know, you start off as an intern architect, so you work for a number of years before you ever take all of your licensing exams and everything, as you're probably familiar. So, you know, those years were so great. They helped me see all the different phases of projects and, you know, every chance to give me more responsibility or
Great mentors.
autonomy. Yeah. You know, I took it, you know, went for it, and, you know, they've just supported my path the whole time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about, I think I know Susan Morash. She's involved in the architecture program, I think, at Dalhousie. I might be saying the name wrong, but I've talked to friends of mine that are in the architecture program doing their masters, and just about how grueling it is, right? You hear the stories of, you know, 60, 80, 100-hour weeks you're sleeping at the architecture building. Like it truly is, though, if you're talking about like other choices in education as far as your masters, whether it's engineering or architecture or law, or seems to be one of the most demanding, kind of grueling.
Yeah, it's definitely intense.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, if you love it, then and you're meant to be there, it's fine, right? It's part of the process,
Yeah.
but it's very time consuming. Very.
Yes, I actually the last couple of years I've been an instructional, like a sessional teacher at Dalhousie for the first year architecture
Oh, okay. Good for you.
course, and I think the language is definitely trying to turn a little bit. I think they're trying to develop a little bit more of a work-life balance.
A reasonable
Yeah.
work-life
So
balance.
I walked in and the first day it was like, you guys are gonna live this. You're gonna sleep here. You're gonna love it. Like it's gonna be the best of times and the worst of times. And they were kind of like, we don't. That's not really the
Not trying to
message
look for the lever
anymore.
for the
We don't want to
Yeah.
scare them
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, they were like, that's not. And I think when I went through, it was really more like a sink or swim kind of approach.
Yeah. So it is slowly changing.
I
then,
I think so. Yeah, I guess maybe just like as everything kind of moves toward the
Evolving,
better of like a work-life balance that's going that way too, which is great. So, but yeah, no, it's certainly yes. It's an intense program, and you make friends there, and you work with peers that I'm still very much in touch with, and have friends for life for sure.
Amazing.
This project that we're working on in Prince Edward Island that you mentioned,
Stratford.
yeah, Stratford. So the firm that we're paired with, the local firm in PEI, is a colleague that I graduated with. Is one of the principals there.
That's
so
cool.
it's you really do develop this kind of mentality of really having lived through something.
Yeah, of course. So
people.
maybe share it just as well with us. You've worked, obviously, like you mentioned, on a lot of different educational buildings with A49 in the past 10 years. Lots of different schools, many of which our listeners locally would know. Sacred Heart School, Yarmouth Elementary, Bridgetown Regional, just to name a few. Can you maybe draw out a couple of those projects or experiences that you had that were kind of maybe milestones for you, or just some memories of working on any one of those, something that stood out, or I'm sure it's all.
Well, it's such a fantastic experience to show up at a building that's opening that you've worked on, which I'm sure Sean would agree.
Yeah. You see the kids in there
Interact with the
and
space.
actually living it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that was what was rewarding with CP Allen.
Absolutely.
Showing up and seeing the kids in it and living it.
Yes.
You
And
know,
hearing their responses and their feedback. Projects are so long. Certainly they start, of course, on the government side for years before the RFPs ever come out and we get involved.
Yeah.
But
then it's years later before that opening day comes, right?
Exactly. And so, so much of our lives were so invested in these projects. We,
it's all consuming.
It's all consuming for many years. You go to sleep thinking about it, trying to come up with solutions and things. So you're very invested, and then to show up on, the opening day or seeing kids go through, or I remember in particular, so one of the first projects where I was the lead design architect was Lamarche and St. Thomas. And of course, everything is always a team, but you have various levels and roles. So that was a big one for me. And the students who had their final year there, so they were just the grade 6s at the time. So they just got 1 year before moving on to other schools. But they wrote a whole series of letters, about what they loved about the school, or these like kind of thank you letters, and I almost cried reading these letters.
How rewarding would that
amazing.
be?
Yeah, coming from these,
it's neat too.
11-year-olds, 10 years.
Because your front-facing client technically is the government of Nova Scotia, right? Yes. Public, but the user of the building is the teachers and the students, right? So that's
it was amazing just to
awesome.
get that response from the students. Yeah,
very neat, and it's very neat today to have PCL and A49 have respectably represented here to talk about Bedford Ravines, the biggest school to date in the province. I think 256,000 square feet approximately around there.
Yep.
So, this is a design build delivery delivery model and collaborative, and so that's unique. It's maybe happened once or twice before, but for a school project, maybe just for context, can we kind of go through the process of the school comes to tender from Public Works, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was initially going to be 2 separate buildings, and then kind of the design phase to decide it makes more sense, or for whatever reason combine it into one for grades 1 to 8 to 9 to 12 all combined. I think there's lots of unique design features and materials used and things like that, but where to start? When does PCL get involved on the tender side? Is it GC or CM, A49? How do things start for everything for our listeners?
I'll jump in. I guess really it starts with the province having chosen this, what they called a collaborative design build model. Design build model, typically it might be, the union of an architect and a constructor put in a fee, go build the school if you're selected.
Right. So responses were an architect and a constructor together,
right.
Bidding on the RFP.
So the collaborative side, or that the province has used, which is actually very similar to what D&D uses, called a modified design build, is a little bit different. So
right. So for our listeners, Department of National Defense, these are for military buildings.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Just for context.
Yep. So if the collaborative design build is, I guess, the province's version of what D&D does. And so in this model, you get a pairing of a designer and a constructor, put in a technical proposal and a fee, typically for that pre-construction kind of design phase, I guess. And then the province would, be able to evaluate who's the best team, right? So that's a huge bonus to that, is they're getting a team. They're not getting a designer.
Yeah.
They're not getting a constructor. They're getting a team.
So any insight into how the province might, and in other situations, they might pick that team? Will they say, okay, this is a immersion of the company A and company B, and this architecture firm has this background, and this like say PCL has this repertoire of past projects that are similar.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things they're taken into perspective, right? Like value engineering type thinking. It's not like about lump sum.
That's right.
Low bid.
They've taken, although that's part of the equation, it's also looking at, value for money, right? So they're, they can look at, A49, who's, the premier architect for, especially for schools in the region,
Yeah.
right? They look at PCL, who I'm going to say is probably the best builder around, and look at that team and that experience. And especially, with A49 and PCL, there's a lot of history there, so we've, Stacy Hughes, one of the principals, and I worked together over 20 years ago on schools, right? Craig Mosher, you mentioned, was involved in CP Allen School, which, I worked on. Catherine, you worked recently with a few people in our office on St. Andrews Community Center.
Yeah.
So, there's a huge synergy there that we were able to demonstrate as well. And so, the province has that opportunity to look at, okay, who's going to be the best team, value for money, select the best team, move forward with the selection and start the design process.
Okay.
And so the collaborative nature of it is, really ourselves and the client group sit down and we really evolve the project together. So there's a budget, but, we're working towards that. We've got a program we're working towards, and, it's a very dynamic, fluid process where we're all sitting down together, so that at the end of the main contract, if you will, we've got a set of drawings that Catherine's done that they absolutely love. PCL on our side, we've provided input on that, and, budget checks and some pricing, and there you go, province, and then we can move forward with construction.
So it's to your advantage to be involved, especially on the GC side, right from this inception point, treating it like a collaborative design build, because you're able to make and have input on these decisions prior to construction starting, whether it be interference, drawings or, different types of materials or all of that.
Yeah.
So then almost like you can, affect from point A to Z, right?
The sooner you can,
Have impact.
initiate change,
Yeah.
the less long-term impact and cost it has, right? Being able to, help bounce ideas off Catherine, right? And she would call and say, hey, what about this? What about that? And, I could provide my input.
Absolutely.
And then especially even on the pricing side of things, right? What if we do this? What if we do that? So that we're getting the best value for the province and ultimately the taxpayer for what they're going to get. We have the ability, these collaborative design projects are flexible enough that we can start construction early. We can do different, we have different mechanisms that we can really work together. And
and that's neat. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying it's become my favorite delivery model.
Right.
Because
I agree. I think it was very successful, and I think a little bit different than maybe a more like a traditional design build. We would go in, when you would win that as a team, as a construction team, you would, a lot of the design and decisions would have been made. So you'd be coming into the project had already had the DPW, like Department of Public Works, they would have already have done a significant amount of pre-design and understanding of what they wanted to build. So you would be tasked with sticking to that quite closely. Like there's flexibility, but this project, it was such an interesting combination of delivery models where we were working as a team with the GC right off the bat. So we're all in it together, which is great. You're coming at it together, but it was an open design process. You're starting with a blank site and the program, and everyone from the Department of Public Works and Education, we're all at the table together, kind of talking through the main design parameters for this project and where we want it to go. And I think, more so than just providing some pricing, I think you were kind of selling that. Sure, John, it was so important to have, and so valuable to have a PCL working, we worked alongside each other through those meetings. We always have costing through projects. There's always like a cost consultant of some description. But to have a GC who's so in the heart of the market, understanding lead times of certain materials, what has a shortage,
labor shortage,
what we could suggest, really great relationship of working with PCL in terms of, there's a shortage of masons. What if these walls could be built out of this instead? That would help alleviate this trade and, support us getting this done faster, or various materials that they brought to the table that we had not used on school projects before that were really interesting.
I'm assuming
to investigate.
that is a real example, because, you will see a lot of clay brick and mason work on most schools in the province in Atlantic Canada. That's a current trend, right? But on this school, in the renderings at least, there's not a lot, and it's mostly cladding, and the envelope is, curtain wall and cladding and ACM panels and other materials, right?
Yeah, so it was very interesting, working with them, but we felt like everyone on the project really had this strong agreement on the design goals of the project. So I really valued their input and their position when they brought forth ideas, because they were always, to still really achieve the learning environment that we were all hoping for. Everyone was on the same page in that regard. So it was just so beneficial.
We'd like to welcome our newest partner here at AC Media, the Freeman Group. Freeman Group Financial works closely with business owners, professionals, and retirees as their primary custodial wealth manager. The Freeman Group is targeting contractors and people in the construction industry as they move forward. The Freeman Group is a great choice for all your financial wealth management with a local touch. We look forward to having the Freeman Group on our podcast several times throughout the next 12 months with specific financial educational episodes. Sublier Trinity is Atlantic Canada's newest drywall and interiors contractor. Sublier Trinity is a joint effort between Trinity Energy Group, local Division 7 experts for over 17 years in Atlantic Canada, and Sublier Constructors, a highly reputable commercial interiors company based in Ottawa since 1986. Sublier Trinity has been performing work on commercial projects throughout Atlantic Canada this year, while planning for more growth in the years to come. We'd like to thank our partner, Pivot Accounting. If you're a contractor or small to medium-sized business owner in the construction industry and are looking to outsource your payroll, accounting services, and financial needs, Pivot Accounting is a great option. Yeah, and I think, again, for context for our listeners as well, I mean, we could have parents tuning in to this podcast that have children that would be attending these schools,
Sure.
living in Bedford or surrounding areas. We could have other people in the industry, professionals, some of the trades that worked on it, other architects, etc. But again, for people outside the industry and an idea of timeline, so the government would have had planned this project and funding, years and years in advance. And then, when both respective parties present here today would have, combined forces and, it was awarded in 2020 in February. So this pandemic thing that we don't talk about as much anymore, right? That was, your kickoff meetings were virtual. You were going through this major shift globally in everything, right? So that would have added to the whole lead time, organizing. You're in a level of uncertainty that's 10 times higher than typically for for making some of these decisions. And at what point and how did it come about where you had two separate buildings and decided to be one? Is that someone on the A49 side, on the PC, is it combined? Is it the government saying, I think we want this to be combined now? How much did the design change with both respective buildings, or did you kind of just bridge them together with a center,
Like shared
corridor
space.
or
Yeah.
something, right? Like I'm trying to think of, a hub. Yeah.
Yeah, so we always start off, a pre-design or schematic design phase of moving the program pieces around on the site and investigating how that could fit, what makes sense. You're looking at sun, you're looking at vehicular traffic, access points, and where the field makes sense, or where, all of these things that play into how a building starts to get positioned on the site. With this collaborative design process, rather than maybe me or my team working just with the Department of Public Works and Education, moving these pieces around and coming up with ideas or possibilities, we're all sitting at, well, in this case, a computer screen. But so it was an interesting process where we actually made digital kind of squares, if you will, like program blocks, what we would normally use, but we would use a physical one often. So, an actual 3D little block of, if a gym is 8,500 square feet, we have a to scale site plan and to scale blocks of how the shape of these rooms could be, that we can all kind of look at how it's fitting on the site. So we did that digitally. And it did work out. It was an interesting kind of new way we do so much digitally, but still these initial phases, there's a really nice aspect to working with your hands.
Something physical. You can.
Yeah.
What about here? What
Exactly.
about here?
And
How does
kids who play with Lego,
Yeah.
it's good for their psychological development.
Oh,
right? It's,
absolutely.
essentially what you're doing.
Your spatial awareness is
Yeah.
it's great. So we did that digitally this time, and very quickly I think became apparent that the amount of program that was required to build these two different schools, we looked at some versions where there were two buildings on site, and it just really would not be the most efficient use of the space. It
Right.
really wouldn't all fit. a large field was part of the program.
There's that big cliff basically
A
on the existing site.
humongous slope. Exactly. Is it 6-7 meters? It's a huge slope.
I think some was, if
on
I
the
read
site.
correctly, that the bottom floor of the 4-level high school is 6 meters below. Is it?
Yes, we
sea
tried to
level,
make
or-
use
yeah.
of this slope that was
Mhm.
on site to do this, take advantage of that, and work with the site as much as possible. And then, we always try to separate all pedestrian movement from buses and car movement. So that ends up being a lot of moving parts on the site as well. So
Right.
all of these things just led to the idea that we could create a lot of efficiencies by having two distinct schools in the one building.
Right. Even
Yeah.
I'm thinking like just for events or for like sporting, to have gymnasiums kind of closed for tournaments and things like that, right? Those are the kind
Absolutely.
of things that come into the thought process.
Yes.
Greatly benefited the community in that sense, because they've got beautiful big cafeteria and these two gyms, and there's
Absolutely.
they can host lots of stuff. And the way that you guys set up the stage, we have not only the stage out into the gym, but a stage facing into the cafeteria. It's going to offer a lot.
Absolutely.
To the
I think
community.
that main space that we brought together is really like a community hub, as you said. And there's still two distinct entrances. So there's a, pre-primary to 8 entry and a high
Right.
school entry. But when you walk into that main space, that's really the shared zone of the school. And so that lends itself really well to the community and supporting, a whole host of functions. It's really flexible, the space, as Sean mentioned. It can be used, for a whole variety of things. And I think there were some mechanical efficiencies and space efficiencies there by putting all of this together.
Can you add to that, Sean, and maybe talk a little bit about, the tender process and, just kind of how that works with just getting the ball rolling on awarding to all trades? Was it tendered out the full package, all trades, or was it a couple of different packages? Was it treated on the tender side as two separate? No, it was all one.
No, we did sequential tendering.
Because of the size? Okay.
Well, not so much the size, but the flexibility of that style of contract, right?
Okay.
So that collaborative design build lends itself to, the ability to create tender packages as you go. So, when we get to, say, 50% design, hey, you know what? By 50% design, we can probably usually tender civil, because civil knows where they're at.
You're digging the same hole. Yeah.
Because I can dig a hole without knowing what kind of paint finishes are going to be on the building.
Even though there might be some changes in the underground, laying of mains for whatnot, right? There's all kinds of
usually
things
by a
happening in
certain
the
point,
balance. Okay,
you're fairly confident about where things are going. So you can take advantage of that, and again, that's where that synergy works with the two teams. In that, we can look at when can we have progressed enough in certain designs to feel comfortable in putting something out to tender. So typically, you might do kind of a civil package. You might then do a structural package, then an envelope package, and then interiors and systems. So that's kind of, and that generally flows with the different submissions that the design team does. So we look at how to do that sequential tendering, and so that allows you to get to construction sooner, right? You're not waiting until the paint colors have been selected to start digging a hole.
Yeah.
So you get that overlap between the two, and there's an element of risk evaluation. Should we, do we have enough information to proceed, or do we not? But it allows you to start early, and it also allows the client to get a certain level of cost certainty. Right? We now know what civil is going to cost. That's a known. Scratch that off the list.
Right.
And if something has changed, we have lots of time to react. So, if civil comes in under budget, Catherine gets excited, and suddenly she can buy some fancy chairs for the library, right?
Then there's this big change order that comes up because of whatever else in the interiors, right? That kind of balances out, which is typically what's going to happen on projects.
It all works out in the wash, but it allows you that cost certainty,
right?
That now we know how much that's going to cost. Scratch it off the list. Or if there's a problem, we have time to react. We have time to do value engineering. We have time to find other means to reduce costs without
Right.
impacting
And
program.
without waiting to start
That's right.
point A, right? So it's moving parts.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think of a typical lump sum project, put it out to tender. Oh, wow, we're $10 million over budget. Now what?
Retender.
Whereas, well, yeah, but you have to go to redesign. And how long does that stretch? Well, by starting that process early, you have time to react and can in real time adjust what you're doing. So that's kind of how we lined up the project, was doing those sequential tenders. And in fact, we were actually able to enhance it even more. If you remember, when we got through concept and into DD, we were kind of struggling on budget, going, well, let's take a step back and relook at something. But in the meantime, what we were able to do is we broke out a civil package just to rough grade the site. We know what the site was generally going to look like.
Right.
So while we're still trying to figure out the building itself, is it going to be 10 meters bigger, smaller? We were able to put a tender out and, within a couple months, get trades out there, blasting, shaping the site.
There was blasting involved in that area.
Yeah, quite a bit. And that afforded us that time to be able to go and do some value engineering and, finish how we wanted the building to be sited, and without really,
slowing it down.
Yeah, slowing it down. So it so there's those benefits of that sequential tendering. Again, it's all part of the bonus of this type of delivery model.
And you've worked on a lot of projects. You've worked on, obviously we talked earlier about these major arenas, complexes in central Canada, but in Nova Scotia, particularly in Atlantic Canada, you've worked in Gagetown on a lot of D&D projects, Halifax Airport, so complex projects. Do you see more of a design build collaborative kind of delivery model, being that you just explained how more beneficial it was to the end client, which is Department of Public Works? Do you see that happening more on some of these major school projects or public projects, like even healthcare? It seems to be a lot of benefits in that delivery model.
I think so. I truly am a fan of it. D&D is a huge fan of it. I've been involved in 4 of them now, these MDBs with D&D. That's the model they're going to. They've seen the benefits of working together on teams. They've seen the benefits of getting that synergy amongst everybody. It gets their projects out the door faster, keeps them on budget more. So that's their go-to model on a lot of projects. And the province is starting to see it too. So I think they've had a really good experience with this Bedford school.
I think it was positive. Yeah, I think we'll see more.
Yeah, because
there's that
schools in particular.
Yeah, Catherine, you've worked on a lot of schools. Sorry,
Yeah.
did you?
No, I was just going to say that because we recently teamed up to try to get there's a collaborative design build for a school or a hospital in where was it, Amherst, right? And so the province is starting to see the benefit of it,
And that wouldn't be common to have a healthcare project with that delivery model. Is that what you're saying? Like that's kind of a
new one for me.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen it before, but no.
And all the schools you've worked on in the past that weren't this delivery model. So it's been a good experience for you personally and for 849 as far as what to piggyback on what Sean was just saying.
I think definitely we have quite a strong education studio group in the office. So, we have a lot of the same people who've done a lot of these types of projects. And I think we were really able to use our strengths. We have a great team. So where there's pieces that are still very much in design, it leaves me to be able to really focus on those, while people who are really focused on building science, like my colleague Joe Doughton is our building science lead, so he's able to really run with the detailing of the envelope package, while I'm really focusing on an interior package, and you're working together as a team, but able to divide up and kind of conquer it together.
Well, there's so much going on, right? I think a lot that kind of ties into a lot of people when they say, because we do have a lot of listeners that are younger people, and one of the opportunities we have here with so many different guests and like we have today is to give people insight into what it means to be in the industry. And if they're thinking about or come from a family where maybe law or be doing some other kind of work is maybe more of a higher status in their mind than the construction industry, or what it means to actually be an architect. And, you're designing things, but like you said, some people are specialized in building science, some are specialized in a lot of times it's more hands-on management, and you're doing change orders and you're dealing with contractors, and you could be heavily on the design side, but there's so many different things that you could be doing, so that gives context into it. And then your background with psychology, your time at Dell and your master's, and education, unique design for educational spaces as opposed to other kinds, or public at least. You're thinking about how the kids are going to interact, what's happening in this room. It's a music room. Can you give any kind of practical examples of the Bedford Ravines School, this specific project, where you had typical rooms you'd see in a school, but you're kind of sprinkling different things throughout it that are unique? Like, I'm sure you give lots of examples, but maybe some unique practical examples of that school where you were able to combine all that.
So interestingly, in 2019 and 2020, I was completing this additional certification to be an ALEP, which is an accredited learning environment planner. I'm not sure how many there are now, but when I did that 3 years ago, there was only 15 in Canada. Our managing principal, Stacey Hughes, is one as well. And so it has kind of guided me toward that additional training and education. So it was really interesting that kind of coincided right as this project was beginning. And certainly, over the last 10 years of focusing on school design, we really, and certainly we've been looking at it before that, but this idea of 21st century learning principles, CPA has some great examples of that as well. And I feel like every project we've done in the past, 10, 15 years, we're pushing different ideas and exploring how we can work within the parameters of
the building code,
budget and code, and what the province and the end user groups are comfortable with or looking to have, but really trying to kind of push the boundaries on what an educational space can be. And I think really what it all boils down to, and what I think is really, really showcased in the Bedford Ravines project, is the idea of choice for the learner. So getting away from a kind of purely a teacher's focus, standing at the front of the room, doing direct instruction. Certainly the school supports that as well, and there's a time and a place for that, of course, in the learning environment, but really trying to provide choice. So, there's a lot of a body of research really supporting the idea that we all learn in different ways. We all have our own best kind of way of learning, and it kind of depends on the task at hand, what you have to learn, whether it's reading, whether it's math, or what have you. But there's some really strong evidence that we want to support just a really wide range of learning environment. So not just a bunch of classrooms down a 8-foot hallway, but this school, I think, really showcases the idea of providing that choice for students if they need quiet, if they need to work in a group and talk things out, if they need to sit and listen to the teacher give a 15-minute presentation and then they break into small groups, or if someone needs to go present on the wall and do a PowerPoint, or work with media in different ways. I think it allows. And
you got the trade school. You got the
absolutely.
shop area,
it allows
right,
for all of these opportunities and choices, and provides that choice in a really flexible, easy to use way. And I think it also allows for teachers and principals, like the administration, to work together in a really interesting way. So they can team teach, they can do a lot of hands-on learning. As you say, there's that huge hands-on kind of skilled trades learning space. So I think all of these things really support kids of all different interests and learning styles.
Yeah.
For instance, in the elementary school, I think it's really an interesting example of it, where the school is so large. A main concept, of course, breaking off of that central hub, you kind of either turn left or turn right into an elementary school or a high school. And so within that, we wanted to break this really big volume down for wayfinding purposes, for comfort. If you're 5 years old, it's a large building to be in. So each wing is we called it a house, and it has 6 classrooms and then a series of other spaces, and that's the program that we were kind of working to with the province. And I think what we did there is really take those 6 classrooms and a couple of what we call small group workrooms, and broke it up in a way that it could be 12 or 14 different learning spaces. So there's the opportunity to have direct instruction, like just a closed off classroom.
Mm-hmm.
There's the opportunity to open up 4 big classrooms in the center, and
Right.
6 teachers
Temporary
can
walls or-
teach
yeah.
150 kids, all
Right.
different types.
Yeah.
You might just providing the opportunity. There's places for groups, there's places for individuals,
Yeah.
but all still within this this house for these kids. So I think it allows a lot of really interesting opportunities for the teachers to run with, and the students to really embrace it within
Yeah.
these comfortable houses.
It was really quite brilliant, I got to say. Like when you came up with the house idea and that those open nodes where we could open those doors up and have the kids come out, I was like, wow, that's
Right,
really
something you
amazing.
hadn't seen before,
Yeah.
right?
And Catherine came up with some pretty amazing ideas.
Well,
on
no,
how to organize all
and
these.
Thank you for sharing the insight too, because I think and always trying to draw threads here and tie in different parties of people who are tuning in, especially under the umbrella of construction, right? I mean, we're all in the industry, so we know what we think when we say that, but a lot of people kind of think different things when they hear that, and to have an architect on this specific project like yourself to talk about what thought processes went into that. We could have teachers listening, and we could have parents where their students are going there, or people that are going to be in the space soon. It opens in 3 weeks, and then just to understand kind of what goes into this complex process of having these spaces built, right? I mean,
And I think two things I want to try to remember to say to that. I think we have to give really good respect to the province. I think there's really great forward thinking happening
to allow you
at
to
DPW.
maneuver that way,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. I think there's some really key players like Daryl McDonald,
Mm-hmm.
who's really believes in providing these flexible, open and welcoming learning environments that are trying to provide a space to enhance, the inherent abilities of each child, and certainly the flexibility that we work with them to create is trying to think about all the different types of learning that needs to take place and that teachers are trying to provide. So giving that, but then also working with PCL, I always found that they were enhancing the design goals and really on board with the overarching design idea. We call it like a party, like the key, how we suss the idea down to like one concept.
Right.
And that in particular the elementary space, where the idea was that you could open up these rooms or close them, and we have these operable walls. The idea was they're not as like the accordion walls that you would picture
Right.
from
That
like the
was
70s.
actually what I was picturing. a little bit.
Yeah, no, they've come a long way.
Yeah.
But we had these operable walls, and they were coming in at a really high price point. And PCL came forward with the idea of this kind of demountable partition that was, more cost effective, and also lended this ability to really create a visual connection through these spaces in a way that made it way better. Like 100%
Right.
supported the concept we were going
It was,
for.
Yeah.
it was important. I really,
Right.
I loved the ideas that A49 was coming with. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to work hard to help them get that.
And that's a
Right.
lot harder to do than people might think when it comes to, spaces and layout and fire rating and sound and all those kind of things, to come up with these ways to be creative.
Absolutely. These
yeah.
solutions. Yeah. And so that was just a really great part of the process. Lots of things over these large scale processes get value engineered, or you work things, you have to always do things very cost effectively. So to be able to work with them to highlight some really key design moments, certainly there's things that you're like, okay, well, we can do this that's more cost effective, but if we really try to protect this idea, because this will really impact the kids in a certain way, and being
Right.
able to
And
work
so
with
you're-
them
you're-
to focus on
yeah,
those
you're
things
having that
and work with the
conversation.
province to highlight those things.
Right.
I think was really successful.
Yeah. And what's that like when you're, like you've both worked on a lot of public jobs, some private, you're teamed up here and you're talking about changes or design, like you just mentioned, and whether or not the client, in this case DPW, and maybe the individuals that you mentioned, like whether or not they're willing to put up more money because this is going to look better, or because this is going to interact better with the space and the use. Like, is it constant conversations on your end with them about these changes and the costs and things, or are you more left to kind of manage that freely? Depends on the situation, depends on the project.
I'd say on this style, this collaborative design build, because we're all in the virtual room together, it's part of the topic, right? So, DPW would question us. Okay, well, how much is that going to cost? I love this,
Rightfully
but,
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
and so, it's our job to provide the program, but do it in a way that we really feel is going to enhance the end user's experience. And but while at the same time, managing, the Crown's
All those
purse.
budget- Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And really trying to get the most for the money, the most for the students. And, there's lots of things moves that we made on site, like the initial moves really make a big difference in the
Right.
project. So, having the efficiency of putting them together, that immediately saves like a lot of cladding and kind of site work in between. And then the way you're stacking things through the building to try to create efficiencies and going on certain structural dimensions and grid that we try to, not create undue cost, so that you can then try to focus on enhancing certain areas that really make that learning environment.
There's a lot of give and take, right? We're gonna
Absolutely.
pick and choose priorities and then try to enhance whatever we can.
Absolutely. And the whole team, the people, the consultant team that we work with all the time on school projects, it was, very much involved on board with this idea and, suggesting, well, if you did this, if these were 10 meter long wings, and this would help that. And, they're all on board, working to the same common goal, which was great.
Yeah, no, thank you. That gives a lot of context into those decisions and all the different parties that are involved on the management team, right? And how that comes about. Plus, too, I think education, our culture specifically, is very critiqued, and people have different opinions. Not necessarily that would have anything to do with more on the the content and those kind of things, but also being part of a new school, especially from grades 1 to 12. That's a long span of different ages and different points of their journey. So to have a unique model for education is it's a big deal. It also shows how these construction projects, they have so much more to do with the community and the culture and the psychology of people in so many ways, right? So
I think that's important to note. Yeah. And we always have a school steering team on any of these large projects, where it is kind of an assembly of end users. So This project was unique in that it was not replacing a school, so there wasn't an existing student body or an existing faculty or administration.
There's 2,000 new students right in the school.
Right. So there wasn't this kind of existing group to work with. Certainly at a certain point, the two principals of the school and administrative people were brought on board, and we were really able to get their feedback. And then at a certain point, we got to develop a student or school steering team. But it's really great to have those opportunities as well to show what you've done so far to it's usually parents and teachers and some students and people from DPW and education are there as well, and you're getting that feedback from the community as the project is moving forward, and you're kind of showcasing the ideas that you're trying to move in the design. But it's good to get their thoughts,
Yeah, for sure.
And it does influence it. At a certain point, it was felt like we really needed to adjust this room so that it could be flexible to be a second music room.
Right. So in that sense, the user's influencing your...
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's a great
we hear that
example.
we need, so we want to make this room, this additional space. We can't add more square feet to the project, but we can, work with this wall assembly to add a whole bunch of extra soundproofing and adjust the layout of the room and some of the storage and the millwork and things so that room can then be flexible as an additional music space if that's what's required. So, we work with, all these very wide range of stakeholders through the whole project to try to achieve the best outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, the idea of we focus so much on education, and often it's, teachers and that, but I think the work that, A49 does designing these schools is, equally really, really important. Like, I think back to the schools I went to, and they weren't really a nice place to go and learn, right? They were bells and cells, they called it.
Yeah.
Now these buildings are like these flexible learning styles. They've really understood what is required to make a good environment for a child to learn. And so I kind of really have learned to appreciate that, I guess, how important that is.
Right.
And the work that, A49 puts into it, because that sets the stage really for what's coming next. So it's an important piece that I don't think really really
you're
understand,
setting
right?
these kids up to have an environment that, that's a hard metric to track data-wise, but the impact that you're having in these designs of these schools, if these kids are 30% more efficient in their learning, those numbers could be astronomical in the 10-year cycle of, how they impact the culture, the economy, everything, right? So
Yeah, I think that's what's so important about the choice, in that, a student who might not, their main learning modality might not just to be like to sit and listen. Very few of us, I've heard statistics where it's 15% of us would best learn by sitting and having someone do a presentation or talk to us, and if you think about it, that's kind of the stereotypical image of school. Someone standing at the front and talking. Right? Yeah. So, and I know that's a very far cry from what it is today, but if so many of us really need to write out notes or discuss it or see images or build it with our hands.
Something tangible.
Yeah, all of these different ways of learning. I think it's so important to try to provide that. I think we went to CPA at as a site visit one day, just as an office, and just seeing so many students there on their free period. They don't even need to be at the school at these different times, and they're just embracing these.
They choose to stay.
The learning
They choose
commons. They're in the library.
That's a subconscious thing too, right? They're probably not even, it's just because it's designed well, because it's a good place to be and interact.
Yeah,
they're just staying there.
That's just so exciting to see. It's a space that they're choosing to be there when they don't need to be. That's great.
Yeah. Sean, you've worked on a lot of different kinds of projects. Like obviously this one is in the educational field. You mentioned Gagetown and a lot of the things that you're currently working on there and you have in the past. When you're working on a project like this, say, and you're lead project manager on behalf of PCL, like, do you ever kind of, you come into a situation or a certain thing on a project like this one or others where, this similar case to something within the company that's national or North American, where you might pick up the phone and call person A in Ontario or Saskatchewan or BC and say, hey, you guys had something like this come up a couple of years ago with a school you worked on there. And talk to them that way, kind of outside of the Atlantic Canada team. Like, does that happen?
Quite
often.
often actually. Because being a multinational company, right? We're all through Canada, we're through the U.S.
I said North American, but it's beyond that.
Yeah,
right?
We have an office in Australia now. We did a project in the Bahamas. So big company. But they've really always tried to keep that line of communication between the different areas. I've done that. I'll call up someone in Toronto I know and say, hey, what about this? What about that?
I guess why not, right? Why not use that tool, your resource, right?
So we've got that broad experience all over the place, and our internal intranet. I can look up projects and find out who the PM was on it and give them a call. And I've had people from one of our Yellowknife projects call, for doing a D&D project and want to talk about how these MDBs work. So you've got, that they've really tried to make sure that communication is available. Because surely somewhere in the company, someone's done it before.
Yeah.
But then, we also have kind of a knowledge sharing, in the company where we call these quest bulletins, where, hey, we did something interesting on this project, do a little quest bulletin, it goes onto the intranet site and it's there for other people. We also have what we called an excellence in construction seminar every year that kind of travels around from different parts of the country, where often kind of a senior person and junior person, whether it's a PM or a super, get teamed up and go to this and provide a presentation on some aspect of construction. And that's all recorded and it's in a library and we've got it. So I was fortunate enough to do one in 1997 on stadium construction of all things.
Of course.
And my mentor Oscar and I went and did that. And so we got to present, and it's, we met people from all over the company, and that knowledge is available now for people. So it's a big piece of the company, kind of the each one teach one mentality we have.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't? I mean, we definitely touched on a lot of things with this specific project, Bedford Ravines schools, but anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention, either of you, on behalf of respective organizations? So we did. I'm sure we could talk all day. I'm sure there's so many things that we could get into once we start. But if anything comes to mind,
I think it's also an exciting learning environment, or learning and a working environment for the teachers and the administrators.
Right. I
think there's a really interesting shift in thinking about it as like a place where someone's going to work for the day as well. So there's also this focus of these teacher collaborative spaces. We call them professional learning communities. Those are kind of dotted throughout the school as well. And this idea that teachers do have this opportunity where they could work together. Maybe there's maybe you're teaching someone about a volcano, and the English teachers having you like read and write an essay about it, and the art teachers having you build a project about it, and the science teachers making the volcano actually explode, and you're thinking about it in all these different ways. So I think there's that opportunity there. So there's also this idea of watching professionals collaborate. So these teacher collaboration spaces are really visible, both from like a supervision perspective. They're watching over the corridors, but they're also showcasing this idea of being an adult professional and collaborating. And it's really where
the students are able to witness that.
The students are witnessing this and seeing how this kind of working method of
it's real life.
Can really function. It's real life. You're getting that hands-on, visible experience of that. So I think that's also a really great aspect to the way these education projects are going as well, because it's reinforcing that, which I think is really where, real life, where these students are going to head in these, collaborative workforce. So, trying to showcase that as well, I think is exciting.
That's a great example, because I think our industry, in construction, and it's a great example today, is really becoming more collaborative on many fronts, all the way through with subcontractors and architects and consultants and GCs and CMs. It's becoming more and more collaborative. So that's a great example. I wonder, Sean, one last thing, could we get your perspective on, a big thing for everyone in construction across the country in North America is the labor shortage, and just your position, with PCL as the lead PM, and just you kind of have that more of a 30,000 foot view, I think, than some people, for sure. But what are you seeing, or what's your intuition kind of tell you in the projects you're involved with currently, and how much of a problem is it, and do you see any ideas of solving it, whether it's more youth? We got to get more youth involved from a young age and solve it downstream that way, but also just your thoughts on that whole.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like we're very much in a labor crunch, and that stems from everything. Our architects, consultants, they're all struggling for people. Ourselves, we're always looking for good people. Suppliers, subcontractors, everyone right now is stretched very, very thin. Supply chains are, still a disaster in many fronts, right? You have one fire in Texas and suddenly you can't get a whole bunch of materials for 6 months, right? It's so I think overall as an industry, we've got to struggle from all fronts, including workers. And I think on the trade side, we've gotten away from supporting the notion that being a tradesperson is great. It is a good career. There's lots of opportunity. Financially, it's very good, and it's rewarding. At the end of the day, you can look back and say, hey, I did that. So there's this, the whole industry is kind of needs some support. And I know, we've been looking at ways to help the trade community to bring in more workers and try to train workers. And because if you don't have the workers, you can't do the work. And in a lot of places, I think we're going to struggle with that, where there's just not enough people to do the work. And so, the industry is going to change, where we're going to try to grow these communities of people, but also I think things are going to slow down a bit and readjust, because there's just that challenge we're having these days, right? So it's going to be a tough one. And we just
always adapting.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine Hefler with 849 and Sean Andrew, PCL. This has been really insightful. It's been a treat to have both perspectives and both major organizations involved in this specific project, Bedford Ravines School. That's opening in a few weeks. Congrats on that, and the opening of the school, and an amazing project for the province. And thanks for being with us today and sharing your perspective and insight and experience. Really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you,
Thanks
Dan.
for having us.
Cheers. We'd like to thank our longtime sponsor, Cook Insurance. Cook is your trusted insurance broker in Atlantic, Canada for 50 years. The Cook team opens up opportunities for contractors by proactively managing the requirements of their bond facility. They expand levels of support and negotiate preferred rate, all while prioritizing ease of doing business. A Navicord partner since 2020, Cook is one of the largest construction brokers in Canada and offers national strength with a local touch. Whatever your insurance needs are, Cook has you covered. The team at Atlantic Construction Podcast has been able to build a strong relationship with the folks at FCA Surety. FCA Surety is strongly invested in supporting the Atlantic construction marketplace and helping contractors to build their businesses. We highly recommend them.